Kiss.
And this is Mick, the Doctor of Digital.
Welcome to Music 101. Music 101 is created to empower music itself and legendary icon in the music industry. Another week, another great episode. Roberta Flack, the storytelling voice behind pop's ballads.
Yes, indeed. Another person that we lost. We're going to talk about all the great stuff and all the great music. This is the quiet genius who transformed pop music with jazz, soul, ballads. And this is, you could say, the two timeless icons. She was born in Black Mountain, North Carolina in 1937. She was a musical prodigy who entered Howard University on a full scholarship at just 15 years old. Trained in classical music, she initially pursued a teaching career while performing in Washington, D.C. clubs at night. It was in these intimate venues, particularly at Mr. Henry's, where she developed her singular sound. So the foundation is classical training meets soul expression.
Yes, Miss Roberta Flack. Thank you so much for sharing your legacy to the world. Mr. Mink, before we get into the deeper analysis, let's set the stage for listeners who might know her hits but not her full story. Who has Roberta Flack?
Well, she emerged from a unique musical background that would define her entire approach to artistry. She was classically trained, a pianist first, vocalist second, and this foundation became the cornerstone of everything she did. Unlike many of her contemporaries who came up through gospel or R&B traditions, Flack brought a conservatory sensibility to popular music. Her breakthrough came in 1972 when Clint Eastwood featured her rendition of The First Time I Ever Saw Your Face in his film Play Misty for Me. The song, originally released on her debut album First Take, 69, soared to number one on the Billboard charts, winning her a Grammy for Record of the Year, and this was just the beginning. Flack followed up with two more number one hits, Killing Me Softly with his song, 1973, and Feel Like Making Love, 1974. Her ability to take a song and infuse it with emotion, depth, and storytelling made her a standout among her peers. She won Grammys for Record of the Year 2 years in a row, an unprecedented feat at the time. With her close friend and collaborator, Donny Hathaway, she created enduring duets like Where is the Love and The Closer I Get to You. Flack's influence can be heard in the voices of Alicia Keys, Lauryn Hill, and countless singer songwriters who have followed in her footsteps. Her signature song, Killing Me Softly, found a new generation of listeners when the Fugees reimagined it in the 1990s, bringing her music back to the top of the charts. In conclusion, Flack's classical foundation wasn't just training, it was the lens through which she would revolutionize popular music interpretation, creating a template for countless artists to follow.
Mr. Mick, that classical foundation is fascinating, especially when you consider how it manifested her most famous recordings. Let's talk about her interpretive genius. What does her approach to distinctive?
Well, she possessed what I would call interpretive courage, the willingness to completely deconstruct a song and rebuild it according to her own emotional logic. Take The First Time I Ever Saw Your Face, originally recorded by Ewan McCowell and Peggy Seeger. Most artists would have treated it as a folk song or given it a conventional pop arrangement. Flack stretched it into a 6 minute rendition and a meditation on love and longing. Perhaps most importantly, Flack understood true interpretation meant finding the personal truth within someone else's song. She made it feel like her own autobiography, not a cover version. This ability to inhabit material completely was what separated her from mere vocal technicians. The song was credited to Norman Gimbel on lyrics and Charles Fox music, and was inspired by Laurie Lieberman's experience of attending a Don McLean concert in 1971. Lieberman wrote a poem about how McLean's performance made her feel. Lieberman co wrote and recorded the first version of Killing Me Softly with his song. Unfortunately, Lieberman's writing partners and management team of Charles Fox and Norman Gimbel did not assign her credit for helping to write the song, so she did not receive millions of dollars worth of royalties. Flack's approach involved several key elements that became her signature. First, she treated tempo as an emotional variable, not a commercial constraint. She would slow songs down to the point where every word carried weight, every pause had meaning. This wasn't indulgence, it was intentional storytelling through pacing. Second, her piano playing was conversational rather than accompaniment. She didn't just play chords, she created musical dialogue between her voice and the keys. Listen to any of her classic recordings, and you'll hear the piano responding to the vocal, commenting on it, sometimes even contradicting it for emotional effect. The influence of this approach cannot be overstated. Artists like Alicia Keys and contemporary R&B stars draw on the interpretive template Flack established. She showed that commercial success didn't require sacrificing artistic depth. In conclusion, Flack's interpretive genius lay in her understanding that a song isn't fixed text, but living material that can be reshaped according to the interpreter's emotional truth and technical vision.
Speaking of her influence on other artists, let's dig deeper into her cultural impact. How did Flack shape not just individual careers but entire musical movements?
Well, her influence extends far beyond accolades. It rests in how she fused formal classical training with emotionally intelligent, commercially viable music. In the late 1960s and early 70s, the industry often boxed artists into narrow genres and performance styles. Flack rejected these limits. She demonstrated that a classically trained, literate vocalist could achieve broad appeal without compromising authenticity or artistic integrity. She wasn't chasing crossover success by diluting her artistry. She expanded the definition of what sophisticated pop music could be. Her impact on the era's refined, intimate sound is undeniable. Artists like Luther Vandross, Anita Baker, and Sade built upon the elegant, understated aesthetic Flack helped popularize. She proved that music could be powerful without being loud or overtly political. Sometimes the most radical act is simply vulnerability expressed with beauty. Today, musical refinement creates deeply personal art with universal appeal. The lineage is clear. Artists learn from Flack that commercial success can coexist with artistic integrity. Beyond R&B and soul, Flack's influence crosses genres. Singer-songwriters like Nora Jones reflect her intimate delivery. She created permission for artists across genres to prioritize emotional honesty over sheer technical display. In conclusion, Flack's impact was transformative because she redefined possibilities for women in popular music, opening space for sophistication, vulnerability, and intellectual artistry that continues to influence artists today.
Mr. Mick, let's talk about her collaborations, particularly with Donny Hathaway. How did these partnerships demonstrate her artistic vision and extended her influence?
The collaboration between Roberta Flack and Donny Hathaway represents one of the most important artistic partnerships in popular music history, establishing templates for musical collaboration that continue to influence artists today. Their chemistry wasn't just romantic, though their personal relationship added unmistakable depth to their performances. It was the meeting of two musical intellects who understood that duets could be conversations, not just vocal competitions or commercial calculations. The significance of their partnership becomes clear when you consider the musical landscape of the early 1970s. Most duets of that era followed predictable patterns. Singers would trade verses, harmonize on choruses, and perhaps engage in some competitive vocal displays. Flack and Hathaway created something entirely different. Their performances on songs like Where is the Love and The Closer I Get to You weren't typical duets where singers take turns showing off their individual skills. Instead, they created musical dialogues where their voices intertwined, separated, and supported each other in ways that reflected the complexity of actual human relationships. What made their collaboration so revolutionary was their shared musical sophistication combined with genuine emotional vulnerability. Both were classically trained musicians who understood harmony, dynamics, and structure at a sophisticated level. But they also brought genuine emotional investment to their performances that elevated technical skill into authentic artistic expression. When they sang together, you could hear two people discovering musical ideas in real time, responding to each other's interpretive choices and building on them. Their approach to call and response was particularly influential. Rather than traditional pattern where one singer leads and another follows, Flack and Hathaway created genuine musical dialogue where leadership shifted organically. Sometimes Flack would introduce a melodic idea that Hathaway would develop and return transformed. Other times, Hathaway's piano playing would suggest emotional directions that Flack's vocals would explore and elaborate. Their influence of their collaborative approach extends far beyond duets into how artists think about musical partnership generally. When you hear the musical chemistry between contemporary artists like Beyonce and Jay-Z, John Legend and Chrissy Teigen in their vocal collaborations, or even the way modern R&B artists approach featured vocals, you're hearing techniques that Flack and Hathaway pioneered. They established their successful collaboration that required genuine listening, emotional vulnerability, and willingness to sublimate individual ego for collective artistic achievement. Their work also demonstrated how personal relationships could enhance rather than complicate professional artistry. This was particularly significant in an industry that often viewed romantic relationships between collaborating artists as sources of drama rather than creative inspiration. Flack and Hathaway showed that intimacy, emotional, intellectual, and romantic, could create artistic magic that neither performer could achieve alone. The technical aspects of their collaboration were equally innovative. Their harmonic understanding allowed them to create complex vocal arrangements that sounded spontaneous rather than calculated. They could sing in unison, harmony, or counterpoint, shifting between these approaches within individual songs to serve emotional rather than merely musical purposes. This flexibility required both technical skill and deep musical trust. Their influence on contemporary R&B vocal arrangements is evident throughout the genre. Artists learned from their example that vocals could be layered, interwoven, and arranged with the same sophistication as instrumental parts. The current trend towards complex vocal arrangements in contemporary R&B draws directly from techniques Black and Hathaway pioneered. Tragically, Hathaway's struggles with mental health and his death in 1979 cut their collaboration short, but their recorded legacy continues to serve as a masterclass in musical partnership. Modern artists still study their techniques for creating genuine intimacy in recorded performance, understanding that their success came from genuine emotional investment rather than mere technical compatibility. Their influence extends beyond music into a broader understanding of creative collaboration. They demonstrated that successful partnerships require genuine vulnerability, mutual respect, and a willingness to subordinate individual ambition to collective artistic vision. These principles have influenced not just musical collaborations, but creative partnerships across artistic disciplines. In conclusion, the Flack Hathaway collaborations established the gold standard for artistic partnership, demonstrating how two distinct voices could create something greater than the sum of their parts while maintaining their individual identities, and proving that genuine intimacy could translate into commercial success without sacrificing artistic integrity.
Mr. Mick, before we discuss her later career, I think it's important to put Flack's interpretive approach in context. How does she compare to other great interpreters and artists who transform existing songs?
That's a fascinating question because it places Flack within a lineage of transformative interpreters while highlighting what made her approach distinctive. When we talk about artists who didn't just cover songs, but completely reimagine them, we're discussing a select group of musicians who understood that interpretation could be as creative as composition itself. Consider Nina Simone, perhaps the most obvious comparison point. Like Flack, Simone had classical training and brought sophisticated harmonic understanding to popular material. but where Simone often used her interpretive power as a weapon, transforming songs into vehicles for political commentary or emotional confrontation, Flack used hers as an invitation. Simone's vision of Sinnerman is a commanding, almost frightening experience that demands your attention. Flack's approach is an intimate whisper that invites you closer. Both approaches are powerful, but they represent different philosophies of interpretation. Simone challenged listeners, sometimes making them uncomfortable with her intensity and political directness. Flack embraced listeners, creating safe spaces for emotional vulnerability. This difference in approach influenced different streams of subsequent artists. Simone's confrontational interpretive style can be heard in artists like Lauryn Hill, while Flack's intimate approach influenced the quiet storm movement in contemporary neo soul. Johnny Cash presents another instructive comparison, particularly his later work with Rick Rubin. Cash's interpretations of contemporary songs like Hurt or Personal Jesus work through radical contextual transformation, taking songs written by younger artists and filtering them through his lived experience of age, mortality, and hard won wisdom. His interpretive strategy was archaeological, digging into songs that bind universal human experiences beneath their original context. Flack's approach was more architectural than archaeological. Rather than excavating existing meaning, she really built songs from the emotional foundation up. Where Cash brought his personal history to bear on contemporary material, Flack brought structural sophistication and classical technique to reshape the song's internal architecture. Both approaches transform familiar material into something entirely new, but through different methodologies. Aretha Franklin offers perhaps the most complex comparison because her interpretive genius operated differently from both Simone and Flack. Franklin's power lay in her ability to make any song sound like it emerged from her own experience while maintaining the song's original emotional core. Her version of Respect, originally recorded by Otis Redding, didn't deconstruct the song so much as inhabit it so completely that it became synonymous with her identity. Flack's interpretive approach was more transformative than Franklin's. Where Franklin found the soul already present in songs and amplified it, Flack often found songs that weren't particularly soulful and infused them with emotional depth through structural reimagining. The first time ever I saw your face wasn't a soul song until Flack made it one, not through vocal power like Franklin might have, but through temporal manipulation and harmonic sophistication. The influence of these interpretive models on approaching contemporary artists is clearly traceable. Franklin's approach influenced powerhouse vocalists who prioritize emotional authenticity. Think Beyonce, Alicia Keys, or Jennifer Hudson. Flack's architectural approach influenced a different category artists entirely. Interpreters who prioritize structural transformation and intimate communication over vocal power or political statement. What distinguished Flack from all these other great interpreters was her unique combination of classical sophistication, emotional vulnerability, and commercial accessibility. Simone had the sophistication and vulnerability, but often sacrificed accessibility for artistic integrity. Cash had the vulnerability and accessibility, but approached songs through intuition rather than technical sophistication. Franklin had the sophistication and accessibility, but often relied on vocal power rather than structural transformation. Flack found a way to combine all three elements: technical sophistication that enhanced rather than obscured emotional communication, vulnerability that invited rather than demanded, and accessibility that never compromised artistic integrity. The combination was unprecedented and remains difficult to replicate, which explains why her influence appears across so many different artistic approaches rather than creating a single school of imitators. In conclusion, while Flack belonged to the great tradition of transformative interpreters, her particular combination of classical technique, structural imagination, and intimate communication created a unique approach to interpretation that influenced multiple streams of contemporary music while establishing new possibilities for how artists could approach existing material.
Moving into the later phase of her career, Mr. Meg, how did Flack adapt the continue to influence music as it evolved around her?
What's remarkable about Roberta Flack's career is how she maintained her artistic identity while adapting to changing musical landscapes. As disco, punk, new wave, and hip hop emerged, many artists from her generation either retreated into nostalgia or tried desperately to sound contemporary. Flack chose a different path. She evolved her approach while staying true to her core principles. In the 1980s and 90s, she began incorporating more contemporary production techniques and working with younger producers, but always on her terms. Her collaboration with Maxi Priest on Set the Night to Music showed how she could embrace reggae influences without abandoning her interpretive approach. The song maintained her signature emotional depth while incorporating new rhythmic elements. More significantly, she became a mentor and inspiration for a new generation of artists. When hip hop began sampling classical soul records, Flack's music became source material for countless tracks. But more than just providing samples, she provided a template for how artists could maintain artistic integrity in commercial contexts. And artists like Lauryn Hill acknowledged Flack's influence on their approach to blending genres and prioritizing emotional authenticity. Her willingness to experiment with different musical styles while maintaining her interpretive core permitted these artists to be similarly adventurous. Even in her later years, as she faced health challenges that affected her ability to perform, her influence continued to grow. Streaming platforms introduced her music to new audiences who discovered that her approach to interpretation and emotional honesty felt remarkably contemporary. In conclusion, Flack's ability to evolve while maintaining her artistic core demonstrated that longevity in music comes not from chasing trends, but from developing a distinctive voice that can adapt to new contexts without losing its essential character.
Mr. Meek, let's discuss her technical innovations. How did her approach to recording and performance create a new possibilities for other artists?
Flack's technical innovations were subtle but profound, particularly in how she approached studio recording as an art form distinct from live performance. While many artists viewed the studio as a place to capture their live sound, Flack understood it as a creative instrument that could enhance and expand her interpretive possibilities. Her use of multi-tracking and overdubbing wasn't just technical, it was artistic. She would layer vocal parts not to show off her range, but to create emotional depth. On songs like Feel Like Making Love, her backing vocals function almost like an interior monologue, adding psychological complexity to the lead vocal. Her piano arrangements were equally innovative. Rather than following standard pop or R&B chord progressions, she incorporated jazz harmonies and classical voicings in ways that supported rather than overwhelmed her vocals. This approach influenced countless piano playing singers, from Alicia Keys to John Legend, who learned that the piano could be both a rhythmic foundation and a melodic commentary. Flack also pioneered what we might call the intimate recording, creating performances that felt like private conversations between artist and listener. Her control of dynamics, breath, and space made her recordings feel immediate and personal, even when heard through speakers. This technique became essential to the Quiet Storm movement and continues to influence artists who prioritize emotional connection over vocal gymnastics. Her approach to song selection and arrangement also became a template for interpretive artists. She showed that covers could be transformative rather than imitative, that an artist's job was to find new truth in existing material rather than simply reproduce it faithfully. In conclusion, Flack's technical innovations weren't about showing off, but about creating new possibilities for emotional communication through recorded music, establishing techniques that remain influential today.
Influential indeed. And Mr. Mink, as we start to wrap up, let's talk about her rewards and recognition. How do these accolades reflect her broader impact on the industry?
Flax awards and recognition tell the story of an artist who achieved both commercial success and critical acclaim while maintaining her integrity. Her Grammy wins for the first time ever, I Saw Your Face and Killing Me Softly with his songs weren't just personal achievements. They validated a new approach to popular music interpretation. What's particularly significant is how these awards recognize artistry over mere vocal technique. The Grammy voters weren't just rewarding impressive singing, they were acknowledging that interpretation itself could be a form of innovation. This paved the way for future artists who prioritize emotional truth over technical display. Her 2020 Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award came at a moment when the music industry was reassessing its history and recognizing artists whose influence had been understated. The award wasn't just honoring her past achievements, but acknowledging her ongoing influence on contemporary artists. The induction of First Take into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 2016 recognized the album as a landmark recording that changed how artists could approach debut albums. Rather than trying to fit into existing categories, Flack had created her own aesthetic universe, and the industry eventually recognized this as groundbreaking. Perhaps more important than formal awards has been the recognition from fellow artists. When Lauryn Hill, Stevie Wonder, and other major artists gathered for her memorial service, they weren't just honoring a peer, they were acknowledging someone who had expanded the possibilities for their own artistry. This peer recognition demonstrates Flack's true legacy. She didn't just make great records, she changed how artists could think about making records. Her influence appears in the work of artists who may not even consciously acknowledge it because her innovations became part of the fundamental vocabulary of contemporary music. Flack's recognition reflects her role not just as a successful artist, but as a cultural innovator whose influence extends far beyond her own recordings. Her influence in contemporary music is everywhere once you know how to listen for it. The current generation of R&B and soul artists all employ techniques that Flack pioneered, using space as an instrument, prioritizing emotional authenticity over vocal acrobatics, and treating interpretation as a creative act rather than mere reproduction. In hip hop, her influence appears in the work of artists like Frank Ocean and Tyler the Creator, who understand that vulnerability can be more powerful than bravado. They've learned from Flack that commercial success doesn't require sacrificing emotional complexity or artistic sophistication. The current trend toward intimate, confessional songwriting owes much to Flack's example. Perhaps most importantly, Flack's influence appears in how contemporary artists approach their careers. Streaming platforms have also introduced her music to new audience who discover that her 1970 recordings sound remarkably contemporary. Her influence on music education and vocal pedagogy is also very significant. In conclusion, Roberta Flack's influence on contemporary music is both obvious and subtle, appearing in the work of artists who understand that music's greatest power lies in its ability to create genuine human connection through artistic truth.
Genuine, for sure, Miss Roberta Flack. Thank you so much for sharing your legacy to the world. Roberta Flack did not just sing ballads, she unlocked their deepest emotional chambers, wedding her voice not just an instrument of power, but is a conduit of profound intimacy and narrative depth. Mr. Mink, would you like to plug in something?
I appreciate the opportunity. Write the book, grow the business. Connect with me on LinkedIn, GMIC, the Doctor of Digital Smith, and also pick up a couple volumes on Track, Ian Hunter, and Burning America. Also, listen to my podcast, the Doctor of Digital Podcast.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Mink, the Doctor of Digital, because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering episodes of the podcast and more empowering authors to come. So, Mr. Mike, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, my friend. Until next time, Deus Volt.
Morticon people, see you soon.